Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading more of The Lazarus Effect by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. I almost said Bill Herbert and Frank Ransom. I didn't, so we're all good. So previously on, not a whole lot happened other than the introduction of another character who's fairly important in the form of Scudi Wang, who rescues Brett as he is being dragged underwater by Flotsam. Or is it Jetsam? Jetsam. Yeah? Oh, I used to know the difference between the two. One has to do with the debris from a wrecked ship floating on the surface, and the other, I think, is the debris from a wrecked ship that isn't. So I guess it would be Jetsam. Anyway, I'm not going to look it up right now. Sorry. There is a difference between the two, I've been told. I have learned, but I don't remember what it is. At any rate, where were we? Right. So she rescues him, and we get a small tour of Mermen life. She's a young thing. She's a cutie. They are a cute couple together. They're both interested in each other, and yeah, so he's alive, she's alive, they're human. She's the heiress of Mermen Mercantile, I think it is, which is, as it turns out, a big deal. And oh, incidentally, both her parents are dead, and definitely not murdered by Gilar Gallo. Definitely not. Absolutely no way they were murdered by Gilar Gallo. Certainly not. Couldn't possibly have been. No, sir. That would be madness. That was me employing a degree of sarcasm. He totally killed them. We just can't confirm that that's true. Anyway, um, which gives one a reasonable suspicion about that merman that washed up in or got caught in Brett and Queets's net towards the beginning. I don't think that that mer person was either of her parents, but there's stuff going on with the Green Dashers that is downright malevolent, as we've found through Izbushka, who is now culpable for murdering hundreds at this point, killing an island at the very least. Um, sure, one that was kind of sinking on its own, but I'm not totally sure I understand the Green Dashers end game in doing that, other than a general, hey, this will convince them that they need us more, and they should come down here as labor. Except we're making land. It's a little confusing to me, what their goal is there, but some more of that will be made clear later on in the book. Suffice it to say, they're not necessarily good people, the Green Dashers, as we've found. Oh, yes, and Justice Ward Keel has gone down to Mermen Place with Kareen Ale to find out what the mermen are up to. Kareen Ale is like, hey, so you've kind of twigged to the fact that we've launched rockets into orbit in order to start retrieving hive tanks and stuff that ship left behind. We're also, by the way, successfully controlling the kelp, and we're about to have land. And you need to kind of get islanders into the mode of thinking that, hey, there's going to be land around, and maybe watch out for that more, among other things. And that we can move to the land if we want. Also, that there's like plotting going on in the background, that there are mermen doing things that she doesn't have control of, and he and the islanders kind of need to be aware because the stuff that the Green Dashes are getting up to is escalating, shall we say. But we haven't learned a whole lot on that score. Alrighty. And with that, we get cracking on this next chunk of the Lazarus effect. This may be the better age for the faith, but this is certainly not an age of faith. Flannery O'Connor, from her letters, Ship Records. Those who watched Vata that day said her hair was alive, that it clutched her head and shoulders. As Vata's agitation grew, her shudders became a steadily progressing convulsion. Her thick spread of hair snaked itself around her and curled her gently into a fetal ball. The convulsions tapered off and ceased in 2 minutes 12 seconds. 4 minutes and 24 seconds after that, the tendrils of her hair became hair again. A thick spread of it fanned out behind her. She stayed in that position, tight and rigid, through 3 full shifts of watchers. The CP was not the first to equate the agitation in the tank with the sinking of Güemes, nor was she the last. She was, however, the only one who wasn't surprised. Not now, she thought, as though she could ever have found a convenient time for thousands of people to die. That was why she needed Gallo. This was something she could live with if it were done, but it was not something that she could do. None of that diminished the horrors she was forced to imagine as Vata lay writhing in her tank. And scooped up like that by her hair. This thought raised every thin stalk on the back of the CP's shoulders and neck. At Vata's first abrupt stirrings, Duque had stiffened, flinched, then slipped quickly and deeply into shock. His only coherent utterance was a high-pitched, quickly blurted, "Ma!" Those medtechs among the watchers, Islander and Mermen alike, vaulted the rim of the pool. "What's wrong with him?" a young clerk asked. She was chinless and hook-nosed, but not at all unpretty. The CP noticed her wide green eyes and the white eyelashes that flickered as she spoke. Rucksack pointed at the telltales above the monitor center across the pool. "Fast, high heartbeat, agitation, shallow breathing, steadily dropping blood pressure, shock. Nothing touched him and they've ruled out stroke or internal bleeding." The CP cleared her throat. "Psychogenic shock," she said. "Something scared him, almost to death." Forceful rejection of the past is the coward's way of removing inconvenient knowledge. The Histories. The weather around Twisp had shifted from scattered showers to a warm wind with clear skies directly overhead. Little sun was wending its way toward the horizon. Twisp checked the rainwater he had recovered, almost 4 liters. He removed the cockpit cover, rolled it forward, and lashed it in place where it could be snatched back quickly if the weather changed once more. He thought only briefly of the daydream he had entertained about Brett and a beautiful Mermen woman. What nonsense! Mermen wanted normal children. Brett would only find disappointment down under. One look at his big eyes and parents would steer their daughters away from him. Islander births might be stabilizing, more births in the pattern of Gerard's girls, more near normals like Brett every season, but that changed nothing in basic attitudes. Mermen were mermen, and islanders were islanders. Islanders were catching up, though, fewer lethal deviants and longer lifespans. The warning beeper on Twisp's depth finder sounded once and again. He glanced at it and reset the lower limit. The sea had been shallowing here for some time. Only 75 meters now. 50 meters and he could start trying to see bottom. One of his dockside gifts had been a small drift watcher, organic and delicately beautiful. It held corneal material at one end that would focus at his demand. At the other end, a mouthpiece aperture fitted itself over his eyes. The thing could only exist immersed most of the time in nutrient, and it grew inexorably, eventually becoming too large for a small boat. Custom dictated that it then be passed along to a larger boat. Twisp ran a hand absently along the smooth organic tube of the thing, feeling its automatic response. He sighed. What could he hope to find on the bottom, even if it did get shallow enough? He removed his hand from the little drift watcher and lifted his attention to his surroundings. The air felt warm, almost balmy, and quite moist after the rains. The seas were calmer. Only that shifting, boiling current stretched ahead of him and for more than a kilometer on both sides. Odd. He had never seen a current quite like it, but then Pandora was always turning up new things. The one constant was the weather. It changed, and it changed fast. He looked east at the cloud bank there, noting how far toward the horizon Little Sun had moved. Big Sun would come up soon. More light, more visibility. He glanced back at the strip of rich blue along the horizon. Yes, it was clearing. The dark bank of clouds east of him receded faster than his motor, and the current chased it. Sunlight tapped his cheeks, his arms. He settled back beside the tiller, feeling the warmth like an old friend. It was as though Pandora had smiled upon his venture. He knew he was very close to where the wave wall had struck Vachon, and now visibility opened up. He moved his gaze around the horizon, seeking a black speck that was not the sea. I'm here, kid. His gaze, sweeping left, glimpsed a distinct line of froth. The sight of it prickled the hairs on his neck and sent a chill down his spine. He sat stiffly upright, staring. A white line on the sea? Oh, sorry, that's an exclamation point. A white line on the sea! Wave wall? No, it wasn't growing larger or receding. Just off to the left of his course and dead ahead, a white line of foam grew more distinct as he approached. Sonar read 50 meters. He slipped the little drift watcher from its container and fixed it to the coracle's side with the corneal end underwater. Fitting his forehead to the mouth aperture, he stared downward. When his eyes adjusted, the view took a moment shaping itself into something identifiable. It was not the rolling contour of the deeps, which he had seen from the subs. It was not the jagged, surreal landscape of the danger areas. This bottom climbed high, almost to the surface. Twisp tore his gaze away from the drift watcher and looked at the sonar reading. 20 meters. He returned his attention to the bottom. It was so shallow he could see delicate, sinewy steps, curving terraces covered with kelp fronds. Rock buttresses and walls guarded the outer edges of the terraces. It all looked artificial, man-made. A core of the Mermen Kelp project, he thought. He had seen many segments of the project, but this was vastly different, and, he suspected, much larger. Mermen engineers experimented with the kelp, he knew that. Supposedly, some of the beds would live and grow even on land, if there ever was such a thing. Now Twisp found himself much closer to believing, if this bed was an example. Mermen were doing all that they claimed they'd do. He'd seen the fine latticework strung for kilometers undersea, a structure where the kelp could climb and secure itself. Undersea walls of rock sheltered other plantations. Islanders had complained about the latticework supports, arguing they were nets to entangle the fishing subs. Twisp had doubted this argument, remembering all the stories of net-bound mermen. Islander complaints had not stopped the project. He gave up studying the bottom and looked at the foam line again. The silvery current that carried him curved off to starboard, sweeping close to that disquieting line. He guessed the intersection to be about 5 clicks off. A distant, recurrent roar accompanied the surf line. Could it be waves foaming across one of the lattice works? He wondered. Both coracles bobbed heavily in a cross-chop, the towed craft pulling at its line and making his job at the tiller a tough one. Surf, he thought. I'm actually seeing surf. Islanders had reports of this phenomenon, few of them reliable. It occurred to him that they were unreliable only because the incidents were so infrequent. The great island of Everett, almost as large as Vachon, had reported a surf sighting just before crashing bottom in a swing surge of Pandora's Sea that left it suddenly awash in a mysterious shallows. Everett had been lost without survivors, bottomed out 30 years back. The course beeper sounded. Twisp boxed up the drift watcher, kicked off the warning switch, and pulled the tiller hard into his belly. Now he was cutting across the great curve of current that still drifted him toward the foaming white line. The current took on a new character. It rolled and twisted along the surface, dispersing waves in its track. There was a determination about it, a feeling of purpose, as though it were a live thing, remorselessly savaging anything in its way. Twisp only wanted out of it. He had never felt such a force. He notched the motor up another 100 revs. At this point, a burnout seemed worth the risk. He had to shake this current. The coracles twisted at the rim of the surge, forcing him to fight the tiller. Then, suddenly, he was through and onto open waves. The white line of surf still lay too close, but now he felt he could beat it. He cranked the motor up another notch, pushing full speed. The silver line of current grew thinner and thinner as he left it behind him. It swept in a great curve around the surf line and disappeared. What if the kid was caught in that? Twisp wondered. Brett could be anywhere. He crouched over his instruments, read the Doppler on Vachon's range signal, and prepared to make a sun sight to report the location of this danger. A red telltale blinked on his radio. Another island's signal. He rotated and homed in on it, identified it as Little Eagle Island, off to the northeast. It was almost at range limit, too far away to ask for distance and a cross-check. His depth finder had nothing in its memory circuits to match the stretch of bottom under him. Dead reckoning, the sun sight, and Vachon's Doppler, however, told him the swift current had taken him at least 10 clicks to the west of his intended course. The current had moved him rapidly, but the diversion meant he saved no time reaching the coordinates where the wave wall had struck Vachon. Twisp coded in the bearings and location, keyed the automatic transmitter, and activated it. The signal went out for anyone listening. Dangerous shallows in this location. Presently he scanned the water around him, squinting and shading his eyes. No sign of mermen, not a buoy, no flag, nothing. That terrifying current had become nothing more than a silver thread glinting along the surface. He took a course reading and prepared for another hour or more of careful dead reckoning. In a moment, he knew, he would be back into that watchful waiting from which anything unusual could bring him instantly alert. A noisy, boiling hissing and clatter came from astern, an eruption of sound that drowned out the quiet pulsing of his motor and the slap of waves against his hull. Twisp whirled and was just in time to see a merman sub leap nose first out of the water and fall back onto its side. The hard metal glittered gold and green. He had a brief glimpse of exterior tools on the sub, all in active mode, whirling and twisting like spastic limbs. The sub splashed down not 100 meters away, sending up a great wave that swept under the coracles and carried Twisp high. He fought for steerage as he watched the sub roll, then right itself. Without thinking about it, Twisp swung his tiller into his gut, turning to go to the rescue. No sub did that sort of thing. The crew could be beaten half to death, particularly inside one of those all-metal Mermen wonders. This crew was in trouble. As he came around, the sub's hatch popped open. A man wearing only green utility pants clambered out onto the hull. The conning tower already was awash, the sub nosing back under the surface. A wave swept the man from his perch. He started swimming blindly, great thrashing strokes that took him at an angle across Twisp's course. The sub vanished behind him with a great slurping air bubble. Twisp changed course to intercept the swimmer. Cupping his great hands around his mouth, Twisp shouted, "This way! Over here!" The swimmer did not change course. Twisp saw... Twisp swung wide and pulled up alongside the man, cut the motor, and extended a hand. Now in the coracle's shadow, the swimmer twisted his head upward and gave Twisp a frightened look, seeing the extended hand. "Come aboard," Twisp said. It was a traditional islander greeting, matter of fact. Not even an implied question, such as, "What in ship's name are you doing out here?" The swimmer took Twisp's hand, and Twisp pulled him aboard, nearly swamping the coracle as the man clumsily tried to grasp a thwart. Twisp pulled him to the center and returned to the tiller. The man stood there a moment, looking all around, dripping a damp pool into the bilges. His bare chest and face were pale, but not as pale as most mermen's. "Is this a merman who lives a lot topside?" Twisp wondered. "And what the hell happened to him?" The swimmer looked older than Brett, but younger than Twisp. His green utility pants were dark with seawater. Twisp glanced to where the sub had been. Only a slow roiling of the water showed where it had gone down. "Trouble?" Twisp asked. Again it was the islander way, a laconic overture that said, "What help do you need that I can give?" The man sat down and lay back against the coracle's deck cover. He drew in several deep, shuddering breaths. "Recovering from shock," Twisp thought, studying him. The man was small and heavy-set, with a large head. An islander? Twisp wondered. He put it as a question, hoping directness would shock the man back to normal. The man remained silent, but he scowled. That was a reaction, anyway. Twisp took his time examining the strange figure from the sea. Oh, sorry, geez Louise. Twisp took his time examining this strange figure from the sea. Dark brown hair lay dripping against a wide forehead. Brown eyes returned Twisp's gaze from beneath thick brows. The man had a wide nose, wide mouth, and square chin. His shoulders were broad, with powerful upper arms running to rather delicate forearms and slender hands. The hands appeared soft, but the fingertips were calloused and shiny. Twisp had seen such fingertips on people who spent a lot of time at keyboard controls. Hooking a thumb back to where the sub had gone down, Twisp asked, "You care to tell me what that was all about?" I was escaping." The voice was a thin tenor. "The sub's hatch was still open when it went under," Twisp said. That was just a comment and could be taken as such if the man desired. "The rest of the sub was secured," the man said. "Only the engine compartment will flood." "That was a Merman sub," Twisp said. Another comment. The man pushed himself away from the deck cover. "We'd better get out of here," he said. "We're staying while I look for a friend," Twisp said. "He was lost overboard in that last wave wall." He cleared his throat. "You care to tell me your name?" "Is Bushka." Twisp felt that he had heard that name before, but he could not make the connection. And now, as he looked at Bushka, there was a sensation that Twisp had seen this face before, in a Vashon passage, perhaps, somewhere. "Do I know you?" Twisp asked. "What's your name?" Bushka asked. "Twisp. Queets Twisp." "Don't think we're acquainted," Bushka said. He sent another fearful gaze across the water and around the coracles. You haven't said what you were escaping from, Twisp said. Another comment.
From people who... We'd all be better off if they were dead. Damn! I should have killed them, but I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Twisp remained silent in shock. Did all mermen speak so casually of killing? He found his voice. But you sent them down under with a flooded engine room.
And unconscious, too. But they're mermen. They'll get out when they recover. Come on, let's get out of here.
Perhaps you didn't hear me, I'm looking for a friend who went overboard from Vashon.
If your friend's alive, he's safe down under. You're the only thing on the surface for at least 20 clicks. Believe it. I was looking. I came up because I saw you.
Twisp glanced back at the distant white line of the surf. That's on the surface.
The barrier? Yeah, but there's nothing else. No merman base, nothing. No merman base, nothing.
Twisp considered for a moment the way Bushka said, mermen. Fear? Loathing?
I know where there's a search and rescue base, Bushka said. We could be there by daybreak tomorrow. If your friend's alive...
He left it there. Talks a bit like an islander, acts a lot like a merman, Twisp thought. Damn, where have I seen him? Twisp glanced at the distant surf line. You called that a barrier?
Mermen are going to have land on the surface. That's part of it.
Twisp let this sink in, not believing it or disbelieving it. Fascinating, if true, but there were other Murray to fry at that moment. So you scuttled a sub and you're escaping from people who would be better off dead. Who would be better dead. Twisp did not believe half of this Bushka's story. The hospitality of the sea said you had to listen. Nothing said you had to agree. Bushka sent an agitated gaze over their surroundings. Second sun was up, but in this season it made a quick sweep and the half-night would be on them soon. Twisp was hungry and irritated.
Do you have a towel and some blankets? Bushka asked. I'm freezing my ass off.
Abruptly contrite because he had failed to provide for the man's comfort, Twisp said, Towel and blankets are rolled up in the cuddy behind you. As Bushka turned and found the roll, Twisp added, You saw me, so you came up, hoping I'd save you. Bushka looked out from beneath the towel with which he was drying his hair.
If I'd left them under CO2 any longer, it would have killed them. I couldn't do it.
Are you going to tell me who they are?
Some people who'd kill us while eating lunch and not miss a bite.
Something in the way Bushka said this set Twisp's stomach trembling. Bushka believed what he said. I don't suppose you have an RDC.
I don't suppose you have an RDC,
Bushka said. He spoke with more than a little snobbishness. Twisp kept his temper and uncovered the instrument near his feet. His relative drift compensator was one of his proudest possessions. The compass arrow in its top was pointing now far off their course. Bushka approached and looked down at the RDC.
A merman compass is more accurate, he said, but this will do.
Not more accurate between islands, Twisp corrected him. Islands drift and there's no fixed point of reference. Bushka knelt beside the RDC and worked its settings with a sureness that told Twisp that this was not the first time the man had used such an instrument. The red arrow atop the housing swung to a new setting.
That should get us there,
Bushka said. He shook his head.
Sometimes I wonder how we found any place without merman instruments.
We? Twisp wondered. I think you're an islander, Twisp accused, barely holding in his anger. We're a pretty backward lot, aren't we? Bushka stood and returned to his position near the opening of the cuddy. Better work a bit more with that towel, Twisp said. You missed behind your ears. Bushka ignored him and sat down with his back against the cuddy. Twisp fed more power to his motor and swung around on the course indicated by the RDC arrow. Might as well go to this rescue base. Damn that Bushka. Was he one of those down-under islanders who had become more mermen than the mermen? You gonna tell me what happened on that sub? Twisp asked. I'm through playing and I want to know what I'm into. With a sullen expression, Bushka settled himself into his former position against the deck. Presently he began describing his trip with Gallo. When he got to the part about Guemes Island, Twisp stopped him. You were at the controls?
I swear to you, I didn't know what he was doing.
Go on. What happened next? Bushka picked up his story after the sinking of the island. Twisp stared at him with a hard expression throughout the recital. Once Twisp felt the tiller housing behind him for the lasgun he stored there. A real Mermen lasgun that cost him half a boatload of Murray. The cold touch of the weapon settled his mind somewhat. He couldn't help asking himself, what if this Bushka's lying? When Bushka finished, Twisp thought a moment, then, You strapped the crew into their seats, including this Gallo, and sent 'em to the bottom. How do you know you didn't kill 'em?
They were tied loose enough to get free once they came around.
I think I'd have. Twisp shook his head sharply. You know, don't you, that it's your word against theirs, and you were at the controls? And you were at the controls? Bushka buried his face in the blanket to around his knees. His shoulders shook, and it was a few blinks before Twisp realized the man was sobbing. For Twisp, this was the ultimate intimacy between two men. He had no more doubts that the story was true. Bushka lifted a tear-streaked face to Twisp at the tiller.
You don't know all of it. You don't know what a perfect fool I was. Fool and tool.
It all came out, then, the bookish islander who wanted to be a merman, the way Gallo had fastened on to this dream, luring the innocent islander into a compromising position. Why didn't you take the sub back to this rescue base? Twisp asked.
It's too far. Besides, how do I know who's with them and who's against? It's a secret organization, even from most mermen. I saw you and I just had to get away from them, out of that sub.
Hysterical kid, Twisp thought. He said, The mermen won't care a lot for your scuttling their sub. A short, bitter laugh shook Bushka.
Mermen don't lose anything. They're the greatest scavengers of all time. If it goes to the bottom, it's theirs.
Twisp nodded. Interesting story is. Now I'll tell you what happened. The part about Guemes, I believe that, and
It's true.
I'd like to disbelieve you, but I don't. I also think you got sucked into it by this Gallo, but I don't think you're all as innocent as you let on.
I swear to you, I didn't know what he intended.
Okay, is. I believe you. I believe you saw me on the sub scanner. You came up intending to be rescued by me. Bushka scowled. Twisp nodded. You swam at an angle away from me so I'd be sure to go after you instead of making a try for the sub. You wanted to pass yourself off as Mermen, have me take you to this base, and you were going to use your knowledge of the Guemes destruction to ensure that Mermen really made good on keeping you down under. You were going to trade that for.
I wasn't. I swear.
Don't swear, Twisp said. Ship's listening. Bushka started to speak, thought better of it, and remained silent. A religious bluff usually worked with islanders, even if they claimed non-belief. Twisp said, What did you do topside? What island?
Eagle. I was a historian and pump control tech.
You've been to Vashon?
A couple of times.
That's probably where I saw you. I seldom forget a face. Historian, eh? Inside a lot. That accounts for your pale complexion.
Have you any idea, Bushka asked, of the historical records the Mermen have preserved? The Mermen themselves don't even know everything they have, or the value of it.
So this Gallo saw you as a valuable to record his doings?
That's what he said.
Making history is a little different from writing it. I guess you found that out.
Ship knows I did.
Uh-huh. Bushka, for now, we're stuck with each other. I'm not going to throw you overboard. but your story doesn't make me comfortable, you understand? If there's a base where you say there's one, well, we'll see."
"There's a base," Bushka said, "with a tower sticking out of the water so far you can see it for 50 clicks."
"Sure there is," Twisp said. "Meanwhile, you stay over there by the cuddy, and I'll stay here at the tiller. Don't try to leave your position. Got that?" Bushka put his face back into the blanket without answering. By the rocking of his body and the shaking sobs, it was obvious to Twisp that he'd heard. So plot lines are starting to come together, slowly but surely. What's so tough about making love to a mute? Finding the right orifice. Mermen joke. Following Ale at a pace painful for his old and weak legs, Ward Keel stepped through a hatchway marked by a red circle. He found himself in a roomful of noisy activity. There were many view screens, every one attended by a tech, at least a dozen console desks with Mermen-style control switches and graphics. Alphanumerical indicators flashed wherever he looked. He counted 10 very large view screens showing underwater and topside vistas. It all had been crowded into a space only a bit larger than Ale's headquarters. Ale's quarters, sorry. But it's not cramped, he thought. Somewhat like these islanders, these mermen had become skillful at using limited areas, although Keel noted that what they thought small an islander would see as spacious. Ale moved him around the desks and screens for introductions. Each worker glanced up when introduced, nodded curtly, and returned to work. From the looks they shot Ale, Keel could tell that his presence in this room was particularly distressing to several of the mermen. She stopped him at a slightly larger desk set on a low dais to command the entire room. Ale had called the young man at this desk Shadow, but introduced him as Dark Peniel. Keel recognized the surname, a descendant of the pioneer poet and historian, no doubt. Peniel's large eyes stared out with demanding focus over high cheekbones. His mouth moved only minimally from its straight line when he acknowledged the introduction. "What is this place?" Keel asked.
"Current control," Ale said. "You'll learn details momentarily. They are involved in an emergency right now. We must not interfere. You see those orange lights flashing over there? Emergency calls for search and rescue teams who are on standby duty."
"Search and rescue?" Keel asked. "Are some of your people in trouble?"
"No," she replied with a tight set to her jaw. "Your people."
Keel clamped his mouth shut. His gaze skittered across the room at the intense faces studying each view screen, at the cacophony of typing set up by the blur of 24 technicians' hands at their keyboards. It was all very confusing. Was this the beginning of that threat Ale had mentioned? Keel found it difficult to remain silent. But she had said, "Search and rescue." This was a time to watch carefully and record. Immediately after the medics had passed their death sentence on him, Keel had begun to feel that he was living in a vacuum that desperately needed filling. He felt that even his long service on the Committee on Vital Forms had been emptied. It was not enough to have been Chief Justice. There must be something more, a thing to mark his end with style, showing the love he had for his fellows. He wanted to send a message down the long corridors that said, "This is how much I cared." Perhaps there was a key to his need in this room.
Ale whispered in his ear. "Shadow, his friends call him that, a more pleasant name than Dark. He's our ablest coordinator. He has a very high success rate recovering islander castaways."
Was she hoping to impress him with her benign concern for islander lives? Keel spoke in a low voice, his tone dry. "I didn't know it was this formalized."
"You thought we left it to chance?"
she asked.
Keel noted the slight snort of disgust. We always watch out for islanders in a storm or during a wave wall. Keel felt an emotional pang at this revelation, sorry. His pride had been touched. "Why haven't you made it known that you do this for us?" he asked. You think Islander pride would abide such a close watch? Ale asked. You forget, Ward, that I live much topside. You already believe we're plotting against you. What would your people make of this setup? She gestured at the banks of controls, the view screens, the subdued clicking of printers. "You think islanders are paranoid," Keel said. He was forced to admit to himself that this room's purpose had hurt his pride. Vachon's security would not like the idea of such Mermen surveillance either. And their fears might be correct. Keel reminded himself that he was only seeing what he was shown. A large screen over to the right displayed a massive section of island hull. "That looks like Vachon," he said. "I recognize the driftwatch spacing." Ale touched Peniel's shoulder, and Keel wondered at the proprietary air of her movement. Peniel glanced up from the keys. An interruption? She asked. Make it short. Could you put Justice Keel's fears to rest? He has recognized his island there. She nodded toward the view screen on the right. Give him its position relative to the nearest barrier wall. Peniel turned to his console and tapped out a code, twisted a dial, and read the alphanumerics on a thin, dark strip at the top of his board. The smaller screen above the readout shifted from a repeat of the hull view to a surrounding seascape. A square at the lower right of the screen flashed V-200. Visibility 200 meters, Ale said. Pretty good. Vachon's about 4 kilometers out from the submerged barrier HA9, moving parallel to the wall, Peniel said. In about an hour we'll begin to take it farther out. The wave wall had it within a 2-kilometer range. We had to do some shuffling, but nothing to worry about. It was never out of control. Keel had to suppress a gasp at these figures. He fought down anger at the younger man's presumption and managed to ask, "What do you mean, nothing to worry about?" Peniel said, "We've had it under control. Young man, diverting a mass like Vachon—" Keel shook his head. "We're lucky to adjust basic positioning when we contact another island. Getting out of the way of danger in a mere 2 kilometers is not possible." The corners of Peniel's mouth came up in a tight smile, the kind of know-it-all smile that Keel really hated. He saw it on many adolescents, sophomoric youths thinking that older people were just too slow. "You islanders don't have the kelp working for you," Peniel said. "We do. That's why we're here, and we haven't time for your islander paranoia." "Shadow?" Ale's voice carried a cautionary note. "Sorry." Peniel bent to his controls. "But the kelp gives us a control that has kept Vachon out of real danger through this area for the past few years. Other islands, too." "What an astonishing claim," Keel thought. He noted from the edge of his vision how carefully Ale watched every move Peniel made. The young man nodded at something on his readouts. "Watch this," he said. "Landro!" An older woman across the room glanced back and nodded. Peniel called out a series of letters and numbers to her. She tapped them into her console, paused, hit a key, paused. Peniel bent to his own board. A flurry of movement erupted from his fingers across the keys. "Watch Shadow's screen," Ale said. The screen showed a long stretch of waving kelp, thick and deep. The V-200 still blinked in the corner square. From it, Keel estimated he was looking at kelp more than 100 meters tall. As he watched, a side channel opened through the kelp, the thick strands bending aside and locking onto their neighbors. The channel appeared to be at least 30 meters wide. Kelp controls the currents by opening appropriate channels, Ale said. You're seeing one of the kelp's most primitive feeding behaviors. It captures nutrient-rich, colder currents this way. Keel spoke in a hushed whisper. How do you make it respond? Low-frequency signals, she said. We haven't perfected it yet, but we're close. This is rather crude if we believe the historical records. We expect the kelp to add a visual display to its vocabulary at the next stage of development.
Are you trying to tell me you're talking to it?
In a crude way, the way a mother talks to an infant, that kind of thing. We can't call it sentient yet. It doesn't make independent decisions. Keel began to understand Peniel's know-it-all look. How many generations had islanders been on the sea without even coming close to such a development? What else did islanders lack that mermen had perfected? Because it's crude, we allow plenty of margin for error, Ale said.
4 kilometers. That's safe?
Keel asked.
2 kilometers, Peniel said. That's an acceptable distance now.
The kelp responds to a series of signal clusters, Ale said.
Why this sudden candor with Vashon's highest islander official? Keel wondered.
As you can see, Ale said, we're training the kelp as we use it.
She took his arm and stared at the widening channel through the kelp. Keel saw Peniel glance at Ale's intimate grip and caught a brief hardening of the young man's mouth. Jealous? Keel wondered. The thought flickered like a candle in a breezy room. Perhaps a way to put Peniel off balance. Keel patted Ale's hand.
You see why I brought you in here?
Ale asked. Keel tried to clear his throat, finding it painfully restricted. Islanders would have to learn about this development, of course. He began to see Ale's problem. The Mermen problem. They had made a mistake in not sharing this development earlier. Or had they?
We have other things to see, Ale said. I think the gymnasium next because it's closest. That's where we're training our astronauts.
Keel had been turning slightly as she spoke, scanning the curve of screens across the room. His mind was only partly focused on Ale's words, and he heard them almost as an afterthought. He lurched and stumbled into her. Only her strong grip on his arm kept him steady. I know you're going after the hive tanks, he said.
Ship would not have left them in orbit if it was not intended for us to have them, Ward.
So that's why you're building your barriers and recovering solid ground above the sea.
We can launch rockets from down here, but that's not the best way, she said. We need a solid base above the sea.
What will you do with the contents of the tanks?
If the records are correct, we've no reason to doubt them, then the riches of life in those tanks will put us back on a human path, a human way.
What's a human way? He asked.
Why, it's Ward, the life forms in those tanks can.
I've studied the records. What do you expect to gain on Pandora from, say, a rhesus monkey or a python? How will a mongoose benefit us?
Ward, there are cows, pigs, chickens.
And whales, how can they help us? Can they live compatibly with the kelp? You've pointed out the importance of the kelp.
We won't know until we try it, will we?
As Chief Justice on the Committee of Vital Forms, and that is who you're as Chief Justice on the Committee on Vital Forms, and that is who you are addressing now, Kareen Ale, I must remind you that I have considered such questions before.
Ship and our ancestors brought.
Why this sudden religious streak, Kareen? Ship and our ancestors brought chaos to Pandora. They did not consider the consequences of their actions. Look at me, Kareen. I am one of those consequences. Clones. Mutants. I ask you, was it not Ship's purpose to teach us a hard lesson?
What lesson?
That there are some changes that can destroy us. You speak so glibly of a human way of life. Have you defined what it is to be human?
Ward, we're both human.
Like me, Kareen. That's how we judge. Human is like me. In our guts, we say, it's human if it's like me.
Is that how you judge on the committee?
Her tone was scornful or hurt. Indeed, it is. But I paint the likeness with a very broad brush. How broad is your brush? For that matter, this scornful young man seated here, could he look at me and say, like me? Peniel did not look up, but his neck turned red, and he bent intently over his console.
Shadow and his people save Islander lives, she remarked.
Indeed, Keel said, and I'm grateful. However, I would like to know whether he believes he is saving fellow humans or an interesting lower life form.
We live in different.
Oh, that's him again. We live in different environments, Kareen. Those different environments require different customs. That's all. But I've begun to ask myself why we islanders allow ourselves to be manipulated by your standards of beauty. Could you, for example, consider me as a mate? He put up a hand to stop her reply and noticed that Peniel was doing his best to ignore their conversation. I don't seriously propose it, Keel said. Think about everything involved in it. Think how sad it is that I have to bring it up. Choosing her words carefully, spacing them with definite pauses, Ale said,
You are the most difficult human being I have ever met.
Is that why you brought me here? If you can convince me, you can convince anyone.
I don't think of the islanders as mutes, she said. You are humans whose lives are important, and whose value to us all should be obvious.
But you said yourself that there are mermen who don't agree, he said.
Most mermen don't know the particular problems islanders face. You must admit, Ward, that much of your workforce is ineffective, through no fault of your own, of course.
How subtle, he thought, almost euphemistic. Then what is our obvious value?
Ward, each of us has approached a common problem, survival on this planet, in somewhat different ways. Down here we compost for methane and to gain soil for the time when we'll have to plant the land.
Diverting energy from the life cycle?
Delaying, she insisted. Land is far more stable when plants hold it down. We'll need fertile soil.
Methane, he muttered. He forgot what point he was going to make in the wake of the new illumination dawning on him. You want our hydrogen facilities. Her eyes went wide at the quickness of his mind.
We need the hydrogen to get into space, she said.
And we need it for cooking, heating, and driving our few engines, he countered.
You have methane, too.
Not enough.
We separate hydrogen electronically and
Not very efficient. He tried to keep the pride out of his voice, but it leaked through all the same.
you use those beautiful separation membranes and the high pressure of deep water, she said.
Score one for organics.
But organics are not the best way to build a whole technology, she said. Look how it's bogged you down. Your technology should support and protect you, help you to progress.
That was argued out generations ago, he said. Islanders know what you think about organics.
That argument is over, she insisted. And with the Hybe tanks,
You're coming to us now, he said, because we have a way with tissues. He allowed himself a tight smile. And I note that you also come to us for the most delicate surgery.
we understand that organics once represented the most convenient way for you to survive topside, she said. But times are changing, and we.
You are changing them, he challenged. He backed off at the frustration visible in her clenched jaw, noting the flash of something bright in her blue eyes. Times are always changing, he said, his voice softer. The question remains, how do we best adapt to change?
It requires all of your energies just to maintain yourselves and your organics, she snapped, not softening. Islands starve sometimes, but we do not starve, and within a generation we will walk beneath open sky on dry land.
Keel shrugged. The shrug irritated the prosthetic supports for his large head. He could feel his neck muscles growing tired, shaking their whips of pain up the back of his neck, crowning his scalp.
What do you think of that old argument in light of this change? She asked.
It was voiced as a challenge. You are creating sea barriers, new surf lines that can sink islands, he said. You do this to further a Mermen way of life. An islander would be foolish not to ask whether you're doing this to sink the islands and drown us mutes.
Ward. She shook her head before continuing. Ward, the end of island life as you know it will come in our lifetime. That's not necessarily bad.
Not in my lifetime, he thought.
Don't you understand that? She demanded.
You want me to facilitate your kind of change, he said. That makes me the Judas goat. You know about Judas, Kareen? And goats?
A shadow of unmistakable impatience crossed her face. I'm trying to impress on you how soon islanders must change. That is a fact, and it must be dealt with, distasteful or not.
You're also trying to get our hydrogen facilities, he said.
I'm trying to keep you above our Merman political squabbles, she said.
Somehow, Kareen, I don't have confidence in you. I suspect that you don't have the approval of your own people.
I've had enough of this, Peniel interrupted. I warned you, Kareen, that an islander— Let me handle this, she said, and quieted him with a lift of her hand. If it's a mistake, it's my mistake. To Keel, she said, Can you find confidence in retrieving the hive tanks or settling the land? Can you see the value in restoring the Kelp to consciousness?
It's an act, It's an act, he thought. She's playing to me, or to Shadow. To what end, and by what means? He asked, stalling for more time.
To what end? We'll finally have some real stability, all of us. It's something that'll pull all of us together.
She seems so cool, so smooth, he thought, but something's not quite right. What are your priorities? He asked. The kelp, the land, or the hive tanks?
My people want the hive tanks.
Who are your people?
She looked at Peniel, who said,
A majority, that's who her people are. That's how we operate down under.
Keel looked down at him.
And what are your priorities, Shadow?
Personally?
His eyes left the screen reluctantly. The kelp. Without it, this planet's an endless struggle for survival.
He gestured to the screens, which, Keel reminded himself, somehow had islander lives balancing on them.
You saw what it can do, Peniel said. Right now, it's keeping Vashon in deep water. That's handy. It's survival. You think that's a sure thing? I do. We have everything that was recovered from the old redoubt after the inundation. We've a good idea what's in the hive tanks. They can wait.
Keel looked at Ale.
Sure, things worry me. I know what's supposed to be in those tanks. What do your records say?
We have every reason to believe the hive tanks contain Earthside plant and animal life, everything ship considered necessary for colonization. And there may be as many as 30,000 human beings, all preserved indefinitely.
Keel snorted at the phrase, every reason to believe. They don't know after all, he thought. This is a blind spot. This is a blind shot. There we go. I can read good. It's italicized. I forgive myself.
He looked up at the ceiling, thinking of those bits of plasteel and plas and all that flesh swinging in a wide loop around Pandora, year after year.
There could be anything up there, Keel said. Anything.
He knew it was fear speaking. He looked accusingly at Ale.
You claim to represent a majority of mermen, yet I sense a furtiveness in your activities.
There are political sensitivities, she broke off. Ward, our space project will continue whether I'm successful with you or not.
Successful? With me?
There seemed to be no end to her manipulative schemes. Ale exhaled, more of a hiss than a sigh. If I fail, Ward, the chances for the islanders look bad. We want to start a civilization, not a war. Don't you understand? We're offering the islanders land for colonization.
Ah, the bait.
he said. Keel thought about the impact such an offer might have on islanders. Many would leap at it. The poor islanders, such as those of Gwynez, the little drifters living from sea to mouth. Vashon might be another matter. But Mermen riches were being exposed in this offer. Many islanders harbored deep feelings of jealousy over those riches. It would worsen. The complexity of what Ale proposed began to lay itself out in his mind, a problem to solve.
I need information, he said. How close are you to going into space?
Shadow, Ale said. Peniel punched keys on his console. The screen in front of him displayed a pair of images with a dividing line down the middle. On the left was an underwater view of a tower, its dimensions not clear to Keel until he realized that the tiny shapes around it were not fish, but merman workers. The view on the right showed the tower protruding from the sea, and, with the proportions clear from the left screen, Keel realized that the thing must lift 50 meters above the surface. There will be one space launch today or tomorrow, depending on the weather, Ale said. A test, our first manned shot. It won't be long after that when we go up after the hybe tanks.
Why has no island reported that thing? Keel asked. We steer you away from it, Peniel said with a shrug.
Keel shook his aching head. This explains the sightings you've heard of. The islander claims that ship is returning, Ale said.
How amusing for you, Keel blurted. The simple islanders with their primitive superstitions. How amusing for you, Keel blurted. The simple islanders with their primitive superstitions. He glared at her. You know some of my people are claiming your rockets as a sign the world is ending. If you'd only brought the CP into this.
It was a bad decision, she said. We admit it. That's why you're here. What do we do about it? Keel scratched his head. His neck ached abominably against the prosthetic braces. He sensed things between the lines here, Peniel coming in on cue. Ale saying mostly what she had planned to say. Keel was an old political infighter, though, aware that he could not tip his hand too soon. Ale wanted him to learn things she had planned for him to learn. It was the concealed lesson that he was after.
How do we make islanders comfortable with the truth? Keel countered.
We don't have time for islander philosophizing, she said.
Keel bristled. That's just another way of calling us lazy. Just staying alive occupies most of us full time. You think we're not busy because we're not building rockets. We're the ones who don't have time. We don't have time for pretty phrases and planning.
Stop it, she snapped. If the two of us can't get along, how can we expect better of our people? Keel turned his head to look at her with one eye and then with the other. He suppressed a smile. Two things amused him. She had a point, and she could lose her composure. He lifted both hands and rubbed at his neck. Ale was instantly solicitous, aware of Keel's problem from their many encounters on the debate floor. You're tired, she said. Would you like to rest and have a cup of coffee or something more solid? There's no comma there, so I'm not sure how to read that one. Would you like to rest and have a cup of coffee or something more solid?
A good cup of Vashon's best would suit me, he said. He tugged at the prosthetic on his right. And this damned thing off my neck for a while. You wouldn't happen to have a chair dog, would you?
Organics are rare down under, she said. I'm afraid we can't provide islander comforts for everything.
I just wanted a massage, he said. Mermen are missing a bet by not having a few chair dogs.
I'm sure we can find you a massage, Kareen said.
We don't have the high incidence of health problems that you have topside, Peniel interrupted.
Again his eyes were on the screen filled with numbers, and he spoke almost out of another consciousness. Still, Keel couldn't let the remark pass.
Young man, he said, I suspect you are brilliant in your work. Don't let the confidence of that accomplishment spill over into other areas. You have a great deal yet to learn.
Turning to lean on Ale's arm, he allowed himself to be assisted out into the passageway, feeling the stairs that followed them. He was glad to get out of that room. Something about it wriggled chills up and down his spine. "Have I convinced you?" Ale asked. He shuffled along beside her, his legs aching, his head filled with bits of information that he knew would soon inflict themselves upon his people.
You have convinced me that mermen will do this thing, he said. You have the wealth, the organization, the determination.
He lurched and caught himself.
I'm not used to decks that don't roll, he explained. Living on land is hard for an old-timer.
"Everyone can't go onto the land at once," she said. "Only the most needy at first. We think the other islands will have to be moored offshore, or rafts may be built for such nearby moorage. They'll be temporary living quarters until the agricultural system is well along."
Keel thought about this a moment. Then, you have been thinking this out for a long time.
"We have."
Organizing islanders' lives for them and
"Trying to figure out how to save the lot of you."
Oh, he laughed, by putting us on the bedroom rafts near shore?
"They'd be ideal," she said. He could see a genuine excitement in her eyes. "As the need for them vanished, we could let them die off and use them for fertilizers."
Our islands, too, no doubt. Fertilizer.
"That's about all they'll be good for when we have enough open land."
Keel could not keep the bitterness out of his voice. You do not understand, Kareen. I can see that. An island is not a dead piece of land. It's alive. It is our mother. It supports us because we give it loving care. You are condemning our mother to a bag of fertilizer.
She stared at him a moment. Then, "You seem to think islanders are the only ones giving up a way of life. Those of us who go back to the surface—"
"Will still have access to the deeps," he said. "You are not cutting the umbilical cord. We would suffer more in the transition. You seem willing to ignore this."
"I'm not ignoring it, damn it! That's why you're here."
Time to end the sparring, he thought. Time to show her that I don't really trust her or believe her. "You're hiding things from me," he said. "I've studied you for a long time, Kareen. There's something boiling in you, something big and important. You're trying to control what I learn, feeding me selected information to gain my cooperation. You—"
"Ward,
Don't interrupt. The quickest way to gain my cooperation is to open up, share everything with me. I will help if that's what should be done. I will not help. I will resist if I feel you are concealing anything from me."
She stopped them at a dogged hatch, and stared at it without focusing.
"You know me, Kareen," he prompted. "I say what I mean. I will fight you. I will leave, unless you restrain me, and I will campaign against—"
"All right!" She glared up at him. "Restrain you? I wouldn't dare consider it. Others might, but I would not. You want me to share? Very well. The bad trouble has already started, Ward. Gwyn's Island is under the waves." He blinked, as if blinking would clear away the force of what she'd said. An entire island under the waves.
"So," he growled, "your precious current controls didn't work. You've driven an island onto—"
"No." She shook her head for emphasis. "No! No! Someone has done it deliberately. It had nothing to do with current control. It was a cruel, vicious act of destruction."
"Who?"
He spoke the word in a low, shocked voice. "We don't know yet, but there are thousands of casualties, and we're still picking up survivors." She turned and undogged the hatch. Keel saw the first signs of age in her slow movements.
"She's still holding something back," he thought, as he followed her into her quarters.
Humans spend their lives in mazes. If they escape and cannot find another maze, they create one. What is this passion for testing? Questions from the Avata. The Histories. Duque began to curse, rolling in the nutrient bath and pounding his fists against the organic sides until great blue stains appeared along the edge. The Guardians summoned the CP. It was late, and Simone Roxack had been preparing for bed. At the summons, Simone pulled her favorite robe over her head and let it drop over the firm curves of her breasts and hips. The robe in its purple dignity erased all but the slightest traces of womanliness from her bearing. She hurried down the passage from her quarters, pulling at her robe to restore some of its daytime crispness. She entered the gloomy space where Vata and Duque existed. Her anxiety was obvious in every moment. Kneeling above Duque, she said,
I am here, Duque. It is the chaplain psychiatrist. How can I help you?
"Help me!" Duque screamed. "You wart on the rump of a pregnant sow! You can't even help yourself!" Shocked, the CP put a hand over the flap covering her mouth. She knew what a sow was, of course. One of the creatures of ship, a female swine. This she remembered well.
A pregnant sow?
Simone Roxack's slender fingers couldn't help pressing against the smooth flatness of her abdomen.
The only swine are in the hive tanks,
She said. She concentrated on keeping her voice loud enough for Duque to hear. "So you think—"
Why are you cursing?
the CP asked. She tried to keep a proper reverence in her tone. "Vata's dreaming me into terrible things," Duque moaned. "Her hair, it's all over the ocean, and she's breaking me into little pieces." The CP stared at Duque. Most of his form was a blurred hulk under the nutrient. His lips sought the surface like a bloated carp. He seemed to be all in one piece.
I don't understand, she said. You appear intact.
"Haven't I told you she dreams me?" Duque moaned. "Dreams hurt if you can't get out. I'll drown out there. Every little piece of me will drown."
You're not drowning, Duque, the CP assured.
"Not here, baboon! In the sea!"
Baboon, she thought. That was another creature from ship. Why was Duque recalling the creatures of ship? Were they at last coming down? But how could he know? She lifted her gaze to the fearful watchers around the rim of the organic tank. Could one of them? No, it was impossible. His voice suddenly clear and extremely articulate, Duque proclaimed, "She won't listen. They're talking, and she won't listen."
Who won't listen, Duque? Who are they?
"Her hair! Haven't you heard a thing I've said?" He pounded a fist weakly against the tank side below the CP. She stroked her abdomen again, absently.
Are the creatures from ship to be brought down to Bandora?
Roxack asked. "Take them where you want," Duque said. "Just don't let her dream me back into the sea."
Does Vata wish to return to the sea?
"She's dreaming me, I tell you. She's dreaming me away."
Are Vata's dreams reality?
Duque refused to answer. He merely groaned and twisted at the edge of the tank. Roxack sighed. She stared across the tank at the mounded bulk of Vata, quiescent, breathing. Vata's long hair moved like seaweed in the currents of Duque's disturbance. How could Vata's hair be in the ocean and here on Vashon simultaneously? Perhaps in dreams. Was this another miracle of ship? Vata's hair was almost long enough to be cut once more. It had been over a year. Was all of that hair that had been cut from Vata, was all of it somehow still attached to Vata? Nothing was impossible in the realm of miracles. But how could Vata's hair speak? There was no mistaking what Duque had said. Vata's hair spoke, and Vata would not listen. Why would Vata not listen? Was it too soon to return to the sea?
Was this a warning that Vata would lead them all back into the sea? Again, Roxack sighed. The chaplain psychiatrist's job could be troublesome. Terrible demands were made upon her. Word of this would be out by morning. There was no way to silence the guardians. Rumors, distorted voices, distorted stories. Some interpretation would have to be made, something firm and supportive, something good enough to silence dangerous speculations. She stood, grimacing at a pain in her right knee. Looking at the odd faces around the tank's rim, she said,
"The next lot of Vata's hair will not go to the faithful. Every clipping must be cast into the sea as an offering."
Below her, Duque groaned. Then quite clearly he shouted,
"Bitch! Bitch! Bitch!"
Roxack placed this reference immediately, having been prepared by Duque's previous mutterings. Bitch was the female of the canine family. Great things were in store for Pandora, the CP realized. Vata was dreaming Duque into wondrous experiences, and Duque was calling forth the creatures of ship. Looking once more at the awed guardians, Roxack explained this carefully. She was pleased by the way heads nodded agreement. All Pandorans will be free when the first highlighter breaks the sea's surface. Sign over a Mermen kelp project. 5 water drum tones sounded a musical call, pulling Brett up, up, lifting him out of a dream in which he reached for Scudi Wang but never quite touched her. Always he fell back into the depths as he had sunk when the wave wall swept him off Vashon. Brett opened his eyes and recognized Scudi's room. There were no lights, but his light-gathering eyes discerned her hand across the short distance between their beds. The hand reached out from the covers and groped sleepily up the wall toward the light. Toward the light switch, sorry.
"It's a little higher and to the right," he said.
You can see? There was puzzlement in her voice. Her hand stopped its groping and found the switch. Brilliance washed the room. He sucked in a deep breath, let it out slowly, and rubbed his eyes. The light hurt him all the way out to the temples. Scudi sat upright on her bed, the blankets pulled loosely around her breasts. You can see in the dark? She persisted. He nodded.
"Sometimes it's handy."
Then modesty is not as strict with you as I thought. She slipped from the covers and dressed in a single suit striped vertically in yellow and green. Brett tried not to watch her dress, but his eyes no longer would obey. I check instruments in a half hour, she said. Then I ride outpost.
"What should I do about, checking in?"
I have reported. I should be finished in a few hours. Don't go wandering. You could get lost.
"I need a guide?"
A friend, she said. Again that quick smile. If hunger strikes, there is food. She pointed toward the alcove and there is food. Wrong emphasis. If hunger strikes, there is food. She pointed toward the alcove end of her quarters. When I get back, you will report in, or they may send someone for you. He glanced around the room, feeling that it would shrink without Scudi here and with nothing to do. You did not sleep well? Scudi asked.
"Nightmares," he said. "I'm not used to sleeping still. Everything's so dead, so quiet."
Her smile was a white blur in her dark face. I have to go. Sooner out, sooner back. When the hatch clicked shut behind her, the stillness of the little room boomed in Brett's ears. He looked at the bed where Scudi had slept. I'm alone. He knew that sleep was impossible. His attention wouldn't leave the slight impression left by Scudi's body on the other bed. Such a small room, why did it feel bigger when she was in it? His heartbeat was fast, suddenly, and as it got faster he found a constriction of his chest whenever he tried to take a deep breath. He swung his legs off the bed, pulled on his clothes, and started to pace. His gaze moved erratically around the room. Sink and water taps, the cupboards with conch-like whorls in the corners, the hatch to the head. Everything was costly metal, but plain and rigid in design. The water taps were shiny silver dolphins. He felt them and touched the wall behind them. The two metals had entirely different textures. The room had no ports or skylights, nothing to show the exterior wall. The exterior world, sorry. The room had no ports or skylights, nothing to show the exterior world. The walls with their kelp-like undulations were breached only by the two hatches. He felt that he had an unlimited amount of energy and nowhere to use it. He folded the beds back into their couch positions and paced the room. Something boiled in him. His chest became tighter, and a swarm of wriggling black shapes intruded on his vision. There was nothing around him, he thought, but water. A loud ringing swelled in his ears. Abruptly, Brett jerked open the outside hatch and lurched into the passageway. He only knew that he needed air. He fell to one knee there, gagging. Two mermen stopped beside him. One of them gripped his shoulder. A man said, "Islander." His voice betrayed only curiosity.
Easy does it, another man said. You're safe.
"Air!" Brett gasped. Something heavy was standing on his chest, and his heart still raced in his straining chest. The man gripping his shoulder said,
There's plenty of air, son. Take a deep breath. Lean back against me and take a deep breath.
Brett felt the tension clawing at his belly lift a bony finger, then another. A new, commanding voice behind him demanded, and I'm not sure who that is. Do we know who that is? Because it might actually be Peniel. Yes, it is. Okay, very good. Sorry. Technically spoilers for something that's one page away, but it's going to help me keep it consistent. Brett felt the tension clawing at his belly lift a bony finger, then another. A new, commanding voice behind him demanded, Who left this mute alone here? There was a scuffling sound, then a shout. Medic! Here! Brett tried to take a fast, deep breath, but couldn't. He heard a whistling in his constricted throat. Relax. Breathe slow and deep.
Relax. Breathe slow and deep.
Get him to a port, the commanding voice said. Get him somewhere he can see outside. That usually works. Hands straightened Brett and lifted him with arms under his shoulders. His fingertips and lips conveyed the buzz and tingle of electric shock. A blurred face bent close to him, inquiring. Have you ever been down under before? Brett's lips shaped a silent no. He was not sure he could walk. Don't be afraid, the blur said. This occasionally happens your first time alone. You'll be all right. Brett grew aware that people were hurrying him along a pale orange passageway. A hand patted his shoulder. The tingling receded, and the black shapes floating across his vision began to shrink. The people carrying him stopped and eased him to the deck on his back, then propped him upright. His head was clearing, and Brett looked up at a string of lights. The light cover directly overhead had blobs of dust and bugs inside. Ahead blotted out his view, and Brett had an impression of a man about Twisp's age, with a backlighted halo of dark hair. You feeling better? The man asked. Brett tried to speak in a dry mouth, then managed to croak, I feel stupid. In the sudden laughter all around him, Brett ducked his head and looked out a wide port into the sea. It was a horizontal view of low-lying kelp with many fish grazing between its leaves. This was a perspective of undersea life far different from the Driftwatch views topside. The older man patted his shoulder and said,
That's all right, son. Everyone feels stupid sometime or other. It's better than being stupid, eh?
Twisp would have said that,
Brett thought. He grinned up at the long-haired merman. Thanks. Best thing for you to do, young man, the merman said, is to go back to a quiet room. Try being alone again. I know Peniel is in here somewhere. I might have screwed up who is who. It doesn't matter. It's fine. The thought pumped Brett's pulse rate back up. He imagined himself alone once more in that little room with those metal walls and all that water. Who brought you in here? The man asked. Brett hesitated. I don't want to cause any trouble. You you won't, the medic reassured him. We can get the person who picked you up freed from regular duty to make your entry into life here a little easier. Scudi Wang picked me up. Oh, there are people waiting for you nearby. Scudi will be able to guide you. Lex, he spoke to a man out of Brett's line of vision, call down to Scudi at the lab. The medic returned his attention to Brett. There's no hurry, but you do have to get used to being alone. A voice behind Brett said, She's on her way. Lots of islanders have a rough time of it down under at first. I'd say every one, in some way or other. Some recover all at once, a few brood for weeks. You look like you're getting over it. Someone on the other side of Brett lifted Brett's chin and pressed a container of water to his lips. The water felt cold and tasted faintly of salt. Brett saw Scudi rushing down the long passage, her small face twisted with worry. The merman helped Brett to his feet, gripped his shoulder, then hurried toward Scudi. Your friend's had a stress flash. The man hurried past Scudi, speaking back at her. Put him through the solo drill before he learns to like the panic, though. She waved her thanks, then helped Brett manage the walk back to her room.
I should have stayed, Scudi said. You were my first, and you seem to be doing so well.
I thought I was too, he said, so don't feel bad. Who was that medic?
Shadow O'Neill. I work with his department in search and rescue, current control.
I thought he was a medic. They said...
He is. Everyone in S&R holds that rating. Scudi took his arm. Are you all right now?
He blushed. It was stupid of me. I just felt I had to get some air, and when I got out into the passage...
It's my fault, she insisted. I forgot about Stress Flash, and they're always telling us about it. I felt, well, like you'd always been here. I didn't think of you as a newcomer.
The air in the passage felt so thick, Brett said, almost like water.
Is it all right now?
Yes.
He inhaled a deep breath.
Kind of wet, though.
It gets heavy enough to do your laundry in sometimes. Some islanders have to carry dry bottles while they're adjusting. If you feel well now, you can report in. Some people are waiting for you. She shrugged at his inquiring look. You have to be processed, of course.
He stared at her, reassured by her presence, but still nursing an abrupt, hollow feeling. Islanders heard many stories of the way mermen regulated everything in their lives, reports for this, tests for that. He started to ask her about this processing, but was interrupted as a large group of mermen clattered past, carrying equipment, tanks, hoses, stretchers. Scudi called after them.
What is it?
They're bringing in the accident survivors, one of them hollered. Ceiling speakers came alive then.
Situation orange. Situation orange. All emergency personnel to your stations. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. Keep docking areas clear. Keep passageways clear. Essential duty stations only for regular personnel. Essential duty stations only. All others report to alternate stations. Medical emergencies only in the passages or trauma shed vicinity. Situation orange. This is not a drill.
More mermen dashed past them. One shouted back, Clear the passageways!
What is it?
Scudi called after him. That island that sank off Mistral Barrier. They're bringing in the survivors. Brett yelled, Was it Vashon? They ran on without answering. Scudi pulled at his arm. "Hurry!" She directed him down a side passage and pulled up a large hatchway, which slid aside at her touch. "I'll have to leave you here and report to my station." Brett followed her through a double hatchway into a cafe. Booths with low-set tables lined the walls. More low tables were scattered throughout the room. Plasteel pillars in rows defined aisleways. Each pillar was set up as a serving station. A booth in the corner held two people bent toward each other across the table. Scudi hurried Brett toward this booth. As they approached, the figure on the right became clear. Brett missed a step. Every islander knew that face, that craggy head with its elongated neck and its bracework. Ward Keel. Scudi stopped at the booth, her hand gripping Brett's. Her attention was on Keel's companion. Brett recognized the red-haired woman. He'd glimpsed her on Vachon. Until he'd met Scudi, he'd considered Kareen Ale the most beautiful woman alive. Scudi's low-voiced introduction was not necessary. "There was supposed to be registration and processing personnel here," Ale said, "but they've gone to their stations." Brett swallowed hard and looked at Keel. "Mr. Justice, they say a whole island's been sunk." "It was Gwemmis," Keel said, his voice cold. Ale looked at Keel. "Ward, I suggest that you and young Norton go to my quarters. Don't stay long in the passages. Ward, I suggest that you and young Norton go to my quarters. Don't stay long in the passages, and stay inside until you hear from me." "I must go, Brett," Scudi said. "I'll come for you when this is over." Ale touched Scudi's arm, and they hurried away. Slowly, painfully, Keel eased himself from the booth. He stood, letting his legs adjust to the new position. Brett listened to the people rushing through the passage outside the hatchway. Laboriously, Keel began shuffling toward the exit hatch. "Come along, Brett." As they stepped into the aisle leading toward the exit, a hatch behind them hissed open, gushing the rich smells of garlic fried in olive oil and spices he couldn't name. A man's voice called out, "You two! No one in the passages!" Brett whirled. A heavy-set man with dark gray hair stood in the open hatchway to the kitchen. His rather flat features were set in a scowl, which changed into a forced smile as he looked past Brett and recognized Keel. "Sorry, Mr. Justice," the man said. "Didn't recognize you at first. But you shouldn't be in the passages. But you still shouldn't be in the passages." "We were instructed to vacate this place and meet the ambassador at her quarters," Keel said. The man stepped aside and gestured toward the kitchen. "Through here. You can occupy Ryan Wang's old quarters. Kareen Ale will be notified." Keel touched Brett's shoulder. "This is closer," he said. The man led them into a large, low-ceilinged room flooded with soft light. Brett could not find the light source. It seemed to wash the room equally in gentle tones. Thick, pale blue carpeting caressed Brett's bare feet. The only furnishings appeared to be plump cushions in browns, burnt red, and dark blue, but Brett, knowing how mermen swung things out of walls, suspected other furniture might be concealed behind the hangings. "You will be comfortable here." "Oh, sorry." "You will be comfortable here," the man said. "Who do I have the pleasure of thanking for this hospitality?" Keel asked. "I am Finn Lawnfin," the man said. "I was one of Wang's servants, and now have the task of caring for his quarters. And your young friend is?" "Brett Norton," Brett answered. "I was on my way to registration and processing when the alarm sounded." Brett studied the room. He had never seen a place quite like it. In some respects it was vaguely islander. Soft cushions, all the metal covered by woven hangings, many recognizably of topside manufacture. But the deck did not move. Only the faint sigh of air pulsing through vents. "Do you have friends on Gwemmis?" Lawnfin asked. "The CP is from Gwemmis," Keel reminded him. Longfin's eyebrows lifted, and he turned his attention to Brett. Brett felt required to give a reply.
I don't think I know anyone from Gwemys. We haven't been in proximate drift since I was born.
Longfin focused once more on Keel.
I asked about friends, not about the CP.
In the man's tone, Brett heard the hard slam of a hatch between Mermen and Islander. The word mutant lay in the air between them. Simone Roxack was a mute, possibly a friend of mute Ward Keel, probably not. Who could be friendly with someone who looked like that? The CP could not be a normal object of friendship. Brett felt suddenly threatened. Keel had realized with an abrupt shock that Longfin's assumptions of obvious Merman superiority were barbed. This attitude was a common one among less traveled mermen, but Keel felt himself filled with disquiet at an abrupt inner awakening.
I was ready to accept his judgment. Part of me has assumed all along that mermen are naturally better.
An unconscious thing, born for years, it had unfolded in Keel like an evil flower, showing a part of himself he had never suspected. The realization filled Keel with anger. Longfin had been asking,
Do you have any little friends on Gwemys? How sad that some of your less fortunate playmates have been killed or maimed. But maiming and death are such an integral part of your lives.
You say you were a servant, Keel said. Are you telling me these quarters are no longer occupied?
They believe rightfully to Scudi Wang, I believe.
Longfin said.
She says she doesn't care to live here. I presume they'll be leased before long and the income credited to Scudi.
Brett gave the man a startled look and glanced once more around these spacious quarters. Everything so rich. Still in shock at his inner revelation, Keel shuffled to a pile of blue cushions and eased himself onto them, stretching his aching legs in front of him.
Lucky Gwemys was a small island,
Longfin said.
Lucky?
The word was jerked from Brett. Longfin shrugged.
I mean, how much more terrible if it had been one of the bigger islands, even Vashon.
We know what you mean,
Keel said. He sighed.
I'm aware that mermen call Gwemys the ghetto.
It doesn't mean anything, really,
Longfin said. There was an undertone of anger in his voice as he realized he had been put on the defensive.
What it means is that the larger islands have been called upon to help Gwemys from time to time. Basic foods and medical supplies.
Keel pressed him.
Not much trade with Gwemys,
Longfin admitted. Brett looked from one man to the other, detecting the subterranean argument boiling. There were things behind those words, but Brett suspected that it would take more experience with mermen before he understood just what those things were. He sensed only the fact of argument, the barely concealed anger. Some islanders, Brett knew, made slanted references to Gwemys as ship's lifeboat. There was often laughter in the label, but Brett had understood it to mean that Gwemys held a large number of worshippers, very religious, fundamentalist people. It was no surprise that the CP was a native of Gwemys. Somehow it was right for islanders to joke about Gwemys, but it rankled him to hear Longfin's intrusions. Longfin strode across the room and tested the controls on a hatch. He turned.
The head's through this hatch, and the guest bedrooms are down the hallway, here, in case you wish to rest.
He returned and looked down at Keel.
I imagine that thing around your neck becomes tiresome.
Keel rubbed his neck.
It does indeed, but I know we all must put up with tiresome things in our world.
Longfin scowled.
I wonder why a merman has never been CP.
Brett spoke up, recalling Twisp's comment on this very question. He repeated it.
Maybe mermen have too many other things to do and aren't interested.
Not interested?
Longfin looked at Brett as though seeing him for the first time.
Young man, I don't think you're qualified to discuss political matters.
I think the boy was really asking a question,
Keel offered, smiling at Brett.
Questions should be asked directly,
Longfin muttered. And answered directly, Keel persisted. He looked at Brett. This matter has always been in dispute among the faithful and their political lobby. Most of Ship's faithful topside think it would be a disaster to turn over the CP's power to a Mermen. They have so much power over other aspects of our otherwise dreary lives.
Lonfin smiled without humor. A difficult political subject for a young man to understand, he said.
Brett gritted his teeth at the patronizing attitude. Whatever. Lonfin crossed to the wall behind Keel, touched a depression there, and a panel slid away. It revealed a huge port that looked out on an undersea courtyard with transparent ceiling and a watery center, where clusters of small fishes flashed and turned among delicate, richly colored plants.
I must be going, Lonfin said. Enjoy yourselves. This, he indicated the area he had just exposed, should keep you from feeling too enclosed. I find it restful myself.
He turned to Brett, paused, and said,
I'll see that the necessary forms and papers are sent for you to sign. No sense wasting time.
With that, Lonfin departed, leaving by the same hatch they had entered. Brett looked at Keel.
Have you filled out these papers? What are they?
The papers fulfill the Mermen need to feel they have everything pinned down. Your name, your age, circumstances of your arrival down under, your work experience, any talents you might have, whether you desire to stay. Keel hesitated, cleared his throat. Your parentage, their occupations and mutations, the severity of your own mutation. Brett continued to regard the Chief Justice silently. And in answer to your other question, Keel continued, no, they have not required this of me. I'm sure they have a long dossier on me giving all the important details, and many unimportant tidbits, too. Brett had fastened onto one thing in Keel's statement.
They may ask me to stay down under?
They may require you to work off the cost of your rescue. A lot of islanders have settled down under, something I mean to look into before going topside. Life here can be very attractive, I know. He ran his fingers through the soft nap of carpet as if for emphasis. Brett looked at the ceiling, wondering how it would be to live most of his life here away from the suns. Of course, people from down under did go topside lots of times, but still. The best disaster recovery team is composed mostly of ex-islanders, Keel said. So says Kareen Ale.
I've heard the Mermen always want to pay you your own way.
I've heard the Mermen always want you to pay your own way, Brett said.
But it shouldn't take long to work off the cost of my...
He suddenly thought of Scudi. How could he ever repay Scudi? There was no coin for that. Mermen have a great many ways of attracting desirable and acceptable islanders, Keel said. You appear to be someone they'd be interested in having aboard. However, that should not be your chief concern of the moment. By any chance, do you have medical training?
Just first aid and resuscitation through school.
Keel drew in a deep breath and expelled it quickly. Not enough, I'm afraid. Gwemmis went down quite a while ago. I'm sure the survivors they're just now bringing in will require more expert attention. Brett tried to swallow in a tight throat. Gwemmis, a whole island sunk.
I could carry a stretcher, he said.
Keel smiled sadly. I'm sure you could, but I'm also sure you wouldn't be able to find the right place to take it. Either one of us would just be in the way. At the moment, we're just what they think of us. Two islander misfits who might do more harm than good. We'll just have to wait. And that, I think, is where we will leave it for today. Let me just double check how long the next chapter is. Actually, you know what? We'll do one more. That one's short. That one's short. We'll do one more. I take it back. Yeah, my spine. No! I used that. There we go. That's right. You all get a bonus. Anyway. We seldom get rid of an evil merely by understanding its causes. C.G. Jung, Ship Records.
There's a curse in the histories, Bushka said, old as humans. It says, may you live in interesting times. I guess we got it.
For some time now, as the coracles cruised through the half-night of Pandora's open sea, Bushka had been telling Twisp what he'd learned from Gallo and from members of Gallo's crew. Twisp could not see Bushka. Only the thin red light of the RDC's arrow glowed in the coracle. All else was darkness, not even stars overhead. A damp cloud cover had swept over them shortly after nightfall.
There'll be more open land than you can possibly imagine, Bushka continued. As much land as you see water around you now, so they say.
Is all bad for the islands, Twisp said, and those rockets you say they're launching.
Oh, they're well prepared, Bushka said.
His voice came out of the darkness with a smug sound that Twisp did not like.
Everything's ready for bringing down the hive tanks. Warehouses full of equipment.
It's hard for me to imagine land, Twisp admitted. Where will they lift it out of the sea first?
The place that the settlers here called Colony. On the maps, it's a slightly curved rectangle. The curve is being widened and lengthened into an oval with a lagoon at its center. It was a complete city before the Clone Wars, walled in with plasteel, so it makes a good place to start. Sometime this year, they'll pump it out, and the first city will be exposed to the sky.
Waves will wipe it out, Twisp said.
No, Bushka countered. They've been 5 generations preparing for this. They've thought of everything. The politics, economics, the kelp.
He broke off as one of the squawks uttered a sleepy bleat. Both men froze, listening expectantly. Was there a night roaming hunt of dashers nearby? The squawks remained quiet. Quick casual reminder that squawks are apparently just ducks. I don't know why they brought ducks down, or why Ship was like, let's totally have ducks. But they implied earlier that they are ducks. So instead of squawking, it's more like a quack. Alternatively, they're something that's very analogous to a duck that happened to already live in, on, or around Pandora. Like dashers are described uh, kind of like large cats, sort of, but not quite. Different. They're very good about leaving details just vague enough that you can't be too sure. Anyway, where were we? Right. The squawks remained quiet.
Bad dream,
Bushka muttered. So Guemes Island with its religious fanatics stood in the way of this land colonization project? Is that it? Twisp asked. Them and their stick to the islands where ship left us attitude? Bushka did not respond. Twisp thought about the things the man had revealed. A lifetime of fisherman's isolation clouded Twisp's imagination. He felt provincial, incapable of understanding matters of worldwide politics and economics. He knew what worked, and that seemed simple enough. All he knew was that he distrusted this grand scheme, which Bushka seemed half enamored of in spite of the experience with Gallo. There's no place in this plan for islanders, Twisp noted.
No, no place for mutants. They're to be excluded.
Oh,
No place for mutants. They're to be excluded,
Bushka said. His voice was almost too low to hear. And who's to say what a mutant is? Twisp demanded. Bushka remained silent for a long time. Finally, he said,
The islands are obsolete. That much I can't argue with. In spite of everything else, Gallo's right about that.
Twisp stared into the darkness where Bushka sat. There was a spot just to the left that felt a little darker than the rest. That's where Twisp aimed his attention. An image of Mermen life came to him, their habitation, places Bushka had described. Home, he thought. What kind of person calls this home? Everything sounded regular and neatly identical, like some insect hive. It gave him the creeps. "This place you're guiding us to," Twisp asked. "What is it? Why is it safe for us to go there?"
The Green Dashers are a small organization, Bushka said. Launch Base 1 is huge. By the numbers alone, our odds are better there than any place else in decent range.
This is hopeless, Twisp thought. If Mermen had not found Brett already, what else could he do? The sea was too big, and it had been a fool's errand trying to fix on the place where the wave wall hit Vashon.
It'll be dawn soon, Bushka said. We could be there shortly after dawn.
Twisp heard the spattering of rain on the tarp. He checked his eel cells with the hand light and found that they were turning a noticeable gray. Right on cue, there was a tremendous deafening lightning thunder flash behind them. In the aftershock stillness, he heard Bushka holler,
"What the fuck was that?"
Twisp flashed the hand light in that direction. Bushka had gone under the tarp head first and somehow got himself turned around. He clutched the edges of the tarp, steadying himself, and in the glow from the hand light, his wide eyes punctuated his bleached face. "We just charged our batteries," Twisp said. "We might take one more of those if it comes around. Then I'll bring in the antenna."
Holy shit! Bushka snorted. Fishermen are crazier than I thought. It's a wonder any of you come back.
"We manage," Twisp said. "Tell me, how did you become an expert on mermen so fast?" Bushka emerged from the tarp.
As a historian, I already knew a great deal about them from before going down under. And then you learn fast when it's necessary for survival.
There was the sound of chest puffing behind his words. Survival, Twisp thought. He extinguished the hand light and wished that he could see Bushka's face without having to flash the light on him. The man was not a total coward, that seemed evident. He had crewed in the subs, like many other islanders putting in their service time. Obviously, he knew how to navigate, but then most islanders learned that in school. With all that, Bushka was driven to seek a life down under. According to him, it was because the mermen had better historical records, some they had never even examined themselves. Bushka was like some of the Gwemez fanatics, Twisp realized. Driven. A seeker after hidden knowledge. Bushka wanted his facts from the source, and he didn't care how he got there. A dangerous man. Twisp renewed his alertness, sensitive to any shift in Bushka's position. The coracle would transmit such movement, should Bushka try to take him.
You'd better believe it's happening, Bushka said. There'll be no place for islands pretty soon.
Radio says Ward Keel's gone down under on some fact-finding mission, Twisp said. You suppose he knew about it all along? A foot scraped the deck as Bushka shifted his weight.
According to Gallo, they did it without word topside.
Silence settled between them for a time. Twisp kept his attention on the guiding arrow, a red, glowing pointer. How could some of the things Bushka said be believed? The barrier above the sea was real, though, and there was no doubt Bushka had run for it fever. Had run for it fever. There we go. Something truly big and ugly chased him. For his part, Bushka lay prisoned in his own thoughts.
I should have had the guts to kill them.
But the thing Gallo represented was bigger than Gallo. No mistaking that. To a historian, it was a familiar pattern. Ships' surviving records reported a plenitude of violence, leaders who'd tried to solve human problems by mass killing. Until the madness of Gwemez, Bushka had thought such things distantly unreal. Now he knew the madness, a thing with teeth and shadows. Pale dawn lightened the wave tops and revealed Twisp working over a small cooking burner on the seat beside him. Bushka wondered whether, in the growing clarity of daylight, Twisp might not rather foreclose on the loan of the kid's shirt and pants. Seeing Bushka's attention on him, Twisp asked, "Coffee?"
Thanks.
Then,
How could I have been that blind and ignorant?
Twisp stared at Bushka silently for a while, then asked, simply, "Going along with them, or letting them go?" Bushka coughed and cleared his throat. His mouth felt full of lint as soon as he swallowed the hot coffee. I'm still afraid, he thought. He looked up at Twisp, cooling his coffee at the tiller. I've never been that afraid, he said. Twisp nodded. The signs of fear on Bushka were easily read. Fear and ignorance drifted the same currents. There would be anger soon, when the fear receded. For now, though, Bushka's mind was chewing on itself. Pride, that's what made me do it, Bushka said. I wanted Gallo's story, history in the making, political ferment, a powerful movement among the mermen. One of their best took a liking to me. He knew I'd work hard. He knew how grateful I'd be.
What if this Gallo and his crew are dead? Twisp asked. You scuttled their sub, and only you are left to say what happened at Gwemmes.
I tell you, I made sure they could escape.
Twisp suppressed a grim smile. The anger was beginning to surface. Bushka studied Twisp's face in the gray light. The fisherman was dark in the way of many islanders who worked out in the weather. Vagrant breezes whipped Twisp's shaggy brown hair across his eyes. A 2 days' growth of beard shadowed his jaws and caught an occasional strand of hair. Everything in the man's manner, the steady movement of his eyes, the set of his mouth, spoke to Bushka of strength and resolution. Bushka envied the untroubled clarity in Twisp's gaze. Bushka was sure that no mirror would ever again return such clarity to his own eyes, not after the Gwemmes massacre. Bushka could see his own death in that butchery.
How could anybody believe I didn't know what was happening until it happened? How can I believe it? They tricked me good, Bushka said, and oh, was I ready. I was all ready to trick myself.
Most people know what it's like to be tricked, Twisp agreed. His voice was flat and almost devoid of emotion. It kept Bushka talking.
I won't sleep for the rest of my life, Bushka muttered.
Twisp looked away at the surging sea around them. He didn't like the note of self-pity in Bushka's tone.
What about the survivors of Gwemmes? He spoke flatly. What about their dreams?
Bushka stared at Twisp in the growing light. A good man trying to save a partner's life. Bushka scrunched his eyes tightly closed, but the images of Gwemmes imprinted themselves on his eyelids. His eyes snapped open. Twisp was staring intently off to the right ahead of them.
Where's this launch base we're supposed to see at dawn?
It'll show before long.
Bushka stared at the lowering sky ahead of them. And when the launch base did show, what then? The question tightened a band around his chest. Would the mermen believe? Even if they did believe, would they act on that belief in a way to protect islanders? And that is where we'll leave it for this week. Oh yeah. Hello, Frank Misers. Thanks for tuning in. Clone Wars. Hope Disney doesn't sue whatever. Um, yeah, that's what they refer to. Basically, the climactic events of um, the Jesus incident that happened right at the end, and presumably some degree of conflict that may extend on either side of that event. Um, Fortunately, since this book is from what, the 80s, 86, 83, sorry, 83. I think they have seniority, but knowing Disney, quick casual reminder, Disney tried to uh, 10, 15 years back, I think, tried to copyright both SEAL Team 6 and Cinco de Mayo as copyrightable properties, which on the face of it is kind of psychotic, to be honest. Pretty demented. That, as I recall, that got laughed out of court. They were like, no, you can't do that. So, which was good. Thanks for tuning in, Richard Cranium. This one's pretty good. It's very, it's a slow burn. Most of the books in in this series are a slow burn in some way, where they kind of like go, 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 and then they kind of ramp up. This one is very evenly paced, even for the, or steadily paced, even for this series, though things are going to get pretty wild in a bit. Things are going to happen very quickly. Something you'll notice is events are told not exactly out of order, but very nearly out of order. Like we hear about the sinking of Güemes well before any of the rest of the cast are aware that it's a thing. Um, Chapters and chapters and chapters go by before anybody knows that that's happened. Besides Bushka, obviously. um, and there's going to be one or two things that are going to do stuff like that. There is a point where it is going to tell things out of order. It's like going to do almost an entire chapter after a bunch of a fairly important series of events happens, and then it'll tell you about them afterwards. Um, you'll know it when we hit it. It's very baffling. It's like, did I miss something? Did I skip like 20 pages? Um, it threw me when I was doing a reread. I had totally forgotten about it, and there might be one more after that. Um, the third book, The Ascension Factor, is kind of nuts in terms of its pacing. It just flies the whole time. It is not laconic at all. Just so much is happening in a very short time frame in that book. It is absolutely crazy. And you're introduced to new stuff that's helping to make you realize the detail of the tapestry you're looking at practically every chapter. It's pretty drastic. Um, I feel like it should have been two books. It's very dense. Um, it does some characters kind of dirty, but they're not quite the characters that we think they are. Um, and some other things. It's an interesting book. Um, there's some recontextualizations and a few other things that occur that are pretty neat. But otherwise, conceptually, it's like, oh yeah, no, this is an evolution of the ideas that were being brought up as we go through. It's pretty great, as well as a bunch of really really radical callbacks to Destination Void. I'm pretty hyped to get to that one. Anyway, we're about what, halfway through? A little more maybe? Yeah, we're at about the halfway point of the Lazarus Effect. Once we finish the Lazarus Effect, we will start reading through Death's End by Xixin Liu, um, which I have opinions on. I don't dislike the book. It's just rereading them has there's some things that I've liked more and some things that I've liked less. Um, we'll get to them. We'll get to them. That's a book with a interminably slow start. Um, it's it's not it maybe isn't quite as yeah it's not quite as bad as the Dark Forest, where the Dark Forest, like you get a couple hundred pages in and you're like, are we going anywhere with any of this? Um, this one is like, here's some revisionist history real quick, and here's some other kind of interesting stuff occurring at the same time. That book I know was supposed to be two books, and then I think Xi Jingliu had like a health scare or a publishing thing, and he had to publish it as one. So he was like, oh, and you can kind of tell how that was supposed to work too. You can tell how a bunch of that was supposed to work, just reading through it, which isn't a bad thing. It's just a thing. Um, so yeah, we'll be getting to that once we're done with the Lazarus Effect. We are one installment away from being finished. Well, next week will be the last installment of Absolution. Um, we got some more dramatic stuff in store, and then kind of want to just talk about some of the ideas that are broached. Also, just what ideas people have for what the hell is going on in that book, because it's a head scratcher. Like I have my opinions on what's going on, but I don't know how accurate they are. Um, and I'll bring that up when we get through it, who I think certain people are, and we'll go from there. Um, they make certain things very clear, and they make certain other things not very clear. I am not going to. You have asked it before, Frank Mises, and I am not going to be doing the fourth book in the three body trilogy. Um, what is that one called? Redemption of Time, I think, is its name. I'm not going to read it aloud. Maybe it's some distant later date, but not for this, not for the purposes of this trilogy read through. Um, I am more likely to read Ball Lightning on stream than I am to read that one on stream, to be honest. Um, I would have to reread it probably uh, on my own time. Speaking of rereading things on my own time, right now I'm starting the great read through on my own time of reread through to get myself acquainted and let it percolate of Endymion, because I do want to commit to reading through that. I'd like to start that by the end of the year, but we'll see. Considering how I'm booking myself out with a bunch of CJ Sherry stuff, that may not wind up happening, but I would like to. Um, yeah. For Monday, we're like a third of the way through the second book in the Full Metal Panic series. Um, that'll probably be two more streams, and then there's a third one, and that will close out the first uh, collector's edition volume, which has three of the light novels in it. And yeah, yep, that's the immediate future. Um, yep. Richard Cranium says, I've been listening to Saturday, Friday Reads, back catalog books and stories. Thanks for doing this for so long. Yep. Yeah, oh yeah, all the Storytime Saturday and Free Read Friday stuff that I was doing years ago. Before I was like a year and a couple months ago, I was like, let's do this just for all three streams that I do throughout the week, because why not? They're the ones that are getting attention. I've commented on this before, but it is mind-blowing and overjoying to me that the thing that has really stuck in terms of people actually wanting to watch the screaming into the void that I'm doing, the static that I'm adding to the noise, the signal to the noise that I'm putting forth, has been the reading of books aloud. I've been very pleased that that was the thing, because I like that was the thing I wanted to do, and then got convinced. Oh, do like other streams too, because it was going to be part of a stream team, and then had zero communication with anyone after that. They forgot me. I don't know, because I was doing it at weird hours. I don't know what was going on there. Anyway, that's where a bunch of my iconography comes from. If so, what else? Yep. So yeah, it pleases me to no end that that's a thing. Oh, I meant to. So I think I've got somebody had commented, and I don't remember who it was last week. I think um, that I think the Twitch stream description stuff was all messed up, or was giving like a dumb category, and I can't remember what it was. I think I have that sorted. I have to go back onto Twitch and change the channel description, and I have to edit it a bit so that I can include the Discord link and just double check to make sure everything else is working okay. Because I think it's like it keeps occasionally trying to be like, oh no, you're trying to do Warframe Wednesdays. I'm like, no, I haven't been doing that for a year. I don't know why you think I am. So I've got to fix that. Anyway, that'll do it for me. Something just broke. I'm not going to worry about the thing that just broke because we're done anyway. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. I have more taxes to finish. So I will see you all Monday. Toodaloo. Oh yes, actually, there are some of the 40K books that I would be happy to read aloud. Not everything. Like I'm not gonna get into like the 30K stuff. I haven't read a huge number of those, and there's some really dumb things that happen in them, frankly, that I'm just like, I'm not gonna touch that. But Caiaphas Cain, I'd happily do. Gaunt's Ghosts is totally worth it. There's some of the other miscellaneous Space Marine focused book series that are not too bad either, that I'd probably do. Eisenhorn and Ravener, I would happily do. Um, so lots of Abnet. Graham McNeil's not too bad. The Ultramarine trilogy, the first couple books of that are really pretty sound as well. Say What Thou Wilt of the Smurfs. Um, there was another one that was really good. There's some orc related books that I have to get around to reading that I'd really enjoy. Um, Oh, another one. What was that one called? The Last Chancers was quite good as well, kind of as a just a fun um, action thriller movie vibe. That one's fairly entertaining, so I could see doing that as well. Um, I was really into a lot of their fluff for a while, but then kind of just as they started really pounding hard um, on the Warhammer 30K, the early stuff, before the fall of before the Emperor's not quite death stuff, I was just like, the more of that I read, the more frustrated I became with it. I was just like, this is really soap operatic. This is getting kind of silly. I don't know how much of this I can take. But yeah, Caiaphas Canal, I'd absolutely do. That one's just the most of my collection that I still have of the 40K stuff is stuff that kind of stands on its own pretty well and are just entertaining reads in and of themselves. They don't require foreknowledge. That's why I kind of want to get into some of the orc literature that I've seen is out there, but I can't. There's like Brutal Cunnin. There's a couple others that are out that I do want to get around to because they seem highly entertaining. Um, Orcs is just fun. They're just a lot of fun. Um, Still waiting on a Tyranids perspective book. A proper Crumpin. I will check that out. Yeah, let me write that down. Let me find my magical storage informational list. But yeah, it's like my collection's gotten pretty of 40K literature is pretty it's selective now. It was like get literally everything that comes out, and now it's like don't. Let's curate it a smidge. Curated, that's the term I'm going for. Um, I'm always open to suggestions, though, as ever. I'll try anything. I'm not. I don't want to rag on Black Library authors. I understand what's going on there. Um, there's limitations there, and most of my gripes are more with Games Workshop than anyone else, than any specific author for them. Because it's not worth expending the energy being upset at the author because they're in some ways just being told this is the thing you need to write, and then they take their own flair. I think there's a couple more Titanicus novels that I haven't read. I read the first one. I think there's another one or two out. And those are entertaining. Those I could do. That I could do for Mecha Mondays. I wouldn't have a problem doing that. Being in a giant cathedral-sized robot. Hell yeah. Um, like the first one certainly read more or less like a less politically active BattleTech novel. It was like all thriller, zero filler. It was pretty good. Where is my magical document? Where have I put it? Oh no. Oh, because I'm in the wrong drive. That'll do it every time, my man. There you are. Books to read aloud. Boop, boop, boop. Proper crumpin. Box in the void. Okay, I will look that up when I have a chance. Anyway, that's it for me. I'll sees y'all later. Yeah, we did the spiel already. So yeah, have fun. It's a extremely dreary day for me. About the most exciting thing going on outside is chunks of ice flowing down a river, which is entertaining in its way, but actually I should check usgs.gov at some point in the near future to make sure I'm not going to have to worry about moving a car. I don't think I do. That's it for me. I'll see you all later. Toodaloo!